away from that, you son of a bitch.
The audience usually gets emotional when a hero dies, especially the Marvel ones, but even when villains bid us farewell, all those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. Anyway, I'm not here to drag on about philosophy, so here are the top 30 Marvel villain deaths in the movies.
Because it's really not just style, Rogers.
You're right. It's not. It's hers.
To kick things off, we've got one villain getting rid of another. Yeah, this is when Jasper Sitwell gets flung out of a moving vehicle as if he's a candy wrapper being used to litter the roads. The kid throwing said candy wrapper here is the Winter Soldier, who does it so efficiently that I'm sure his manager would have been very proud of him. This is actually one of the few cases where a villain's death doesn't help the heroes, because both Captain America and Black Widow needed him for further interrogation regarding his work with Hydra. However, Bucky had other plans, and he needed to show the audience why his villain name was worthy enough to be included in the film's title. But seriously, this makes you wonder exactly how expendable you are when you're part of a villainous organization. Bro literally got yeeted out of a freaking car. I mean, the disrespect is insane.
Your sources say that she meant to betray us the whole time! Now your turn! I reveal!
Next up is an effective way to keep one's mouth shut. Of course, in order to achieve this, you need to have enough power to wield an Infinity Stone, so I suppose these tips will only come in handy to someone as strong as the dude I'm using for reference. Ronan the Accuser was a brilliant villain, but I'm not even focusing on him for this entry. It's more of the dude he takes out within a couple of seconds just because he was throwing a hissy fit. I know that may seem a bit disrespectful to the character, but he's literally named the Other, so he's clearly not that important to the plot, is he? The death may not have been dramatic or anything like that, but it did give us a good look into the kind of power Ronan possessed. Sure, he was no Thanos, but he definitely set a high standard. I mean, that neck snap was cleaner than Gwen Stacy's back snap from The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
The only matter I do not take seriously, boy, is you. Your politics bore me. Thank you, daughter. Perhaps I treated you too harshly.
Ah, look at this. Thor finally goes for the head. Sadly, it's a bit too late for him and everyone else involved. Thanos had already done what he needed to do, so he didn't feel the need to be so villainous anymore. Sadly for Thor though, this meant that his opponent was much weaker than the version he fought in Infinity War, so it was more of a pathetic victory than a respectable one. Seeing someone like Thanos in such a sorry state did leave the audience a bit confused as to how they should feel about the whole thing.
Where are they?
Answer the question.
But the Mad Titan did deserve punishment for all the hurt he caused to the people of the universe. I suppose that's why Thor chose to give him the Ned Stark treatment without letting him even speak another word. Yeah, this experience affected the God of Thunder so much that he decided to go and become Fat Thor. Next up, we've got Deadpool and Wolverine joining forces to take out the villainess, aka Cassandra Nova. The evil sister of Professor X was definitely going to need something deadly to take her out, and that's exactly what Wade Wilson and Logan gave her in this epic finale. There's not a lot of focus on Nova, as she's the one who only finds herself on the raw end of the deal.
Or Spock. Hard to say.
But the means to her end was what made the whole thing so appealing. We got to see Deadpool and Wolverine not only working together, but also maxing out their healing powers to ensure the Time Ripper would get destroyed. I was a bit disappointed when I realised that there would be no direct encounter with the main villain, but it was still satisfying to watch the bold femme fatale meeting her end. You know, I really love telekinesis and other mind control powers, but losing your hair in exchange does sound like a pretty mean rule. This entry sees Vision finally getting his sweet revenge on Corvus Glaive, especially after what he'd done to the sentient robot earlier on in Infinity War. We all know that Glaive used that sneak attack to render Vision basically useless for the rest of the movie, but at least our boy had enough resolve to pay his attacker back in kind, that too with the same weapon. Oh yeah, and another thing we need to consider is how well Captain America was able to keep up with Glaive, even though it was for a small period of time. But then again, you can't really expect much from a ripped dude who's probably only as strong as 3 Arnold Schwarzeneggers. I mean, that's no hate to Arnie, but Corvus Glaive would have been a much tougher opponent to beat than the Predator, and we all know it.
Get out of here! Go! Why aren't these drones firing?
You're in the strike zone. The chance of getting hit is...
Fire all the drones now!
Man, I gotta admit that this one's a death that still doesn't feel like a death at all. Mysterio is supposed to be this extremely sly and cunning villain who always seems to find his way around a tight spot. Sure, he can get defeated, as it happens in this scene too, but how the heck did the guy die?
Biometric scan complete. Welcome back, Peter. Shall I execute all cancellation protocols?
Do it!
I know he caught a few strays from one of the drones, but that shouldn't be enough to take his life, right? Plus, the way it actually ends for Mysterio is after Spider-Man takes away the Edith glasses from him. So even though the wounds came before, the audience could have easily forgotten about them, which means it looked as if Spider took Beck's life by simply taking away a toy he stole. But hey, we do get to see an awesome display of Spider sense right before, so that makes the whole scene worth it.
Come on, Peter Tingle.
Could end your friend's life in an instant.
I gotta tell you, he's not really my friend.
Our next entry shows us how movie knowledge always comes in handy. In Avengers Infinity War, Spider-Man strikes for his team, but in order to achieve this, he has to rely on a certain strategy he saw in the 1979 classic Alien.
Okay, did you ever see this really old movie, Aliens?
Well, that was the need of the hour, because there was no way Iron Man was going to beat Ebony Moore even with his nanosuit. The dude was toying with freaking Doctor Strange, so the only way out was to send him out. The plan to have Moore blasted into space where he'd freeze to death was pretty smart from a little kid, but it's actually quite disturbing to watch, especially Moore's expression in his frozen state. Thank God a Gen Z kid saw the value in a classic movie, eh? See, there's a reason I give you the occasional piece of film trivia. Who knows when you'll need it against an Ebony Moore of your own?
Your powers are inconsequential compared to mine.
Yeah, but the kid's seen more movies.
Now we have Alexander Pierce getting pierced by Nick Fury, aka Samuel L. Jackson. I don't know if you remember him, but this dude was the leader of Hydra and a massive pain in Nick Fury's butt. The man tried everything he could to destroy S.H.I.E.L.D., but by the end of Winter Soldier's climactic battle, he lost everything that he was hoping to build for himself. Bro even considered taking out Scarlett Johansson, and nobody's gonna accept an A-list celebrity leaving the Avengers so soon, which was why the writers allowed Nick Fury to finally get his payback after all the stress he had to go through during the film's runtime. Yeah, I'm sure Fury felt a lot of relief after shooting down Pierce. I'm even more certain that Samuel L. Jackson really wanted to use some of his favorite words for this moment. Unfortunately for him, this wasn't a Quentin Tarantino film, so he had to take a quiet W.
Romanov. Natasha. Natasha, come on.
Who would have thought that an ant would be the one to crush someone as strong as Cull Obsidian? Yeah, in the final battle of Avengers Endgame, we see a gargantuan scale battle, and when the situation is so big, it makes sense for Ant-Man to go giant mode. And then we get to see a proper Uno reverse, as Bro casually steps on Cull Obsidian as if he's the ant in this scenario. It's done so nonchalantly that I don't even think Scott Lang realized he just took the life of someone who's almost as powerful as a nerfed Hulk. Yeah, I say that because the statement perfectly describes Mark Ruffalo's angry green giant. I think that what makes this sequence so special is the fact that Iron Man was having a hard time against him, but Ant-Man takes care of it in a single second.
That wasn't our only time machine.
You want to know what he does to you? That's enough.
Who would have thought out of everyone in her tortured existence, Nebula would sabotage herself? Well, it's the 2014 version of herself who's still loyal to her big daddy Thanos, but only out of fear rather than respect. 2023 Nebula had already gone through tons of character development, so she clearly didn't care for any allegiance towards the Mad Titan. Shooting herself could also be seen as some kind of liberation from the chains of her past. You know, maybe this scene tells us that Nebula is finally free from the shackles of her father's dominion. But then again, this is mostly speculation based on my own theories, and I don't have a lot to back up such a deep explanation, to be fair. However, true beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. Although, if I use the same logic, then 2014 Gamora has just witnessed something very ugly.
Doesn't mean you're useless.
Walk away from that, you son of a bitch.
Can you imagine the kind of disrespect that comes with getting blasted by an unoccupied suit? Yeah, Sarvin was apparently so unimportant to Tony Stark that he figured it would be better to shoot a hole through his chest without even being at the scene of the crime. It's the first time we see an Iron Man suit operate without Tony in it.
Try the jet stream.
And they really had us in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. The fight that precedes the chest blast was pretty cool though, and if I'm being honest, I gotta say that Sarvin looks like a much better villain than Killian. Jesus Christ, this was some savage deliverance from Iron Man, as he showed no mercy at all to his opponent. I can imagine this would have hurt a lot worse than the impact of one of those chest bursters. Hey, I came up with another alien reference. Guess I'm Spider-Man now, eh?
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Yep, we now have Blade, who's the cause of Frost encountering a lethal injection. This scene actually has a few more iconic moments, such as a very sassy line about certain people always trying to skate uphill, and also a reaction that had us all saying, that's literally me. No, seriously, this fight would have been over ages ago if Frost didn't have that weird reattachment and regenerative power on him.
You're too late, Blade.
Blade's reaction was very much warranted when he saw what Frost was capable of, but that only makes his final attack all the more satisfying to watch, you know? And yes, I should also point out the amazing fight choreography between both characters. At one point, it was really hard to follow all the sword fighting, you know? The CGI isn't great, but it's not that bad either, and it is used minimally. This movie saved Marvel from bankruptcy back in the 1990s, so I believe a similar film can save the MCU in what's left of the 2020s. So this entry may be a typical case of showing how girl power gets it done. Let it also be known that the person being destroyed here is also a woman. Sure, Proxima Midnight doesn't deserve any kind of sympathy, but holy mother of God, the way they brutally annihilated her was a bit much, you know? As long as it was her against Black Widow, you could say the outcome heavily favored her. The moment you add Scarlet Witch in the mix, it's an instant role reversal. The woman never really stood a chance, especially because she was so occupied with her current opponent. You know, if you look close enough, you can see Proxima Midnight's head being ripped apart from her body before getting completely demolished anyway. Yikes, I don't think anyone would want to go out like that.
Jarvis, do me a favor and blow Mark 42.
Who would have thought that Iron Man 3's climax would include a random end to a deadly dude? But then again, Aldrich Killian really is the kind of villain who deserves that odd trope. He definitely had tons of power to work with, as could be seen in how he was able to take down a couple of Tony's Iron Man suits, although, to be fair, they weren't his strongest output. Even so, bro managed to survive a detonation, so I've got to give him some points for that, right? However, to see Pepper being the one to put an end to him was quite shocking and almost a little bit funny, I guess. Like, bro was making his whole speech about him being this all-powerful being, only to get violated brutally by the hero's girl. But then again, Pepper did work for Tony, so I suppose she was venting out her frustrations over a boss at the villain. Yeah, Killian never stood a chance then, did he? I think one very important thing we should always remember is that Deadpool doesn't care about being the hero. He just does as he pleases, and if a villain kidnaps his woman and threatens violence, bro isn't gonna just sit there and let it happen. Francis deserved what was coming to him, and since he apparently didn't feel any pain, you could say he had an uneventful death. What really got me though was the way Colossus tried to talk Wade out of it.
The way the world sees us. The way we...
He may be likable, and Deadpool may want him for, inexplicable reasons, but even that's not going to be enough to make the foul-mouthed assassin hold back his inner instincts. This is the same dude who casually murdered a whole bunch of goons just to get some kind of information on Francis, so he was never going to spare the main target.
There are no words.
This is a great scene, but I don't think Logan would have loved such an unsavory victory. His match against Lady Deathstrike had him struggling for the most part, but I'm sure he was holding back because he could sense that she wasn't her true self. Having said that, it's no excuse for the embarrassment he had to face during the battle. Lady Deathstrike sure wasn't holding back as she unleashed one lethal strike after the other. You could even see Wolverine's face going like, please, let this end. But of course, he had to remind us all why he's such a legend, so he used his big brain energy to give his opponent a pretty ugly farewell. I think this scene also hits hard because you could tell that Logan didn't want to do this to her. However, sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do.
Yep. I'm ready, go, go, go!
Next is a sequence that gave us strong visuals to end a strong foe. Ivan was always going to be a threat to Tony Stark's reputation as Iron Man because that dude was adamant his dad was the one who invented the concept of the core reactor. Now, I won't get into details regarding that, but the final battle involving Whiplash was easily the most appealing aspect of the entire film. The villain had both Iron Man and War Machine down and out. But this is where you realise that their earlier battle was actually a form of foreshadowing. The massive explosion that followed the dual beam strategy was quite badass, but the funny thing is that Ivan kind of facilitated his own demise with all those hidden explosives. I suppose he genuinely didn't want to live with the fact that Tony Stark bested him.
You lose.
All these drones are rigged to blow. We gotta get out of here, man. See ya!
Carl Obsidian really is expendable, isn't he? I think the dude was only put into the movies so that he could be pounded around. Iron Man made a mockery of him, Ant-Man stomped him, and now the Hulkbuster gives him a really painful death. That too, he didn't need the whole suit, just the arm that Carl broke off. This is the first time we see Bruce beating someone without relying on the Hulk.
Oh, screw you, you big green asshole!
But you know what else is interesting here? He says that he'll do it himself when the Hulk refuses to come out to help him. Then, he puts Carl's hands into something that's quite similar to the Infinity Gauntlet's shape and form. Yes, this was a total callback to that Thanos post-credit scene.
Come on!
Imagine being a villain who's so strong that he had to end himself. Icarus was easily the most powerful of the Eternals, but sadly, he had to turn over to the dark side and play the villain. We all saw what he was capable of against the Deviants, but I'd say his display against his own team members was what made it quite evident. At the end of it all, Bro realized that he messed up and wasn't worthy of any redemption, so he straight up flew into the sun to burn himself. He did this because he knew there was no one on Earth who could do that to him, so in a way, you could say it was the villain doing a favor for the heroes. Even so, it felt really anticlimactic because there was no real resolution to Icarus's feelings. I mean, I mess up too from time to time, but I don't embark on a trip to the sun every time that happens. There's no shame in getting burnt by the Phoenix, but it does have an impact when you're supposed to be the god of mutants. Apocalypse was easily flexing his skills by taking on the most powerful mutants of the franchise with ease, but the moment you send Jean Grey in with a hint of Phoenix powers, you might as well throw in the towel. Bro went from Michael Tyson to Michael Scott in the matter of a few seconds. I have to give it to the flaming visuals that caused his demise, because you needed an extravagant outburst like that to take down someone as powerful as Apocalypse. All was revealed indeed, but unfortunately, Bro couldn't live to see the days of the Dark Phoenix. However, I don't think that's a bad thing considering how that movie turned out. The top 10 begins with the power of the Guardians getting it done. Ronan the Accuser was a freakishly overpowered character, and the earlier entry only gave us a glimpse of his powers. In the final battle of the Guardians of the Galaxy, we found out real soon that there was no way our heroes were going to defeat their angry blue opponent. What they did need was the power of teamwork following a pretty random and entertaining dance sequence.
Come on.
Now, if we were to get creative, we could say that the process of taking Ronan down felt quite similar to that of some weird ritual. Even so, it was an impressive sequence that highlighted the power of the Guardians, and I, for one, am not going to be missing Ronan's presence for sure. Jeff Bridges has had a celebrated career, but if you ask me, Bro should have just been the dude from The Big Lebowski. He was a much more likable character, but I gotta give credit where it's due, and Obadiah Stane was a very strong villain to kick off the MCU. The final battle in the OG Iron Man film had some very exciting elements and very high stakes, as Tony's suit wasn't even at full capacity. Not sure how much of a difference that would have made though, considering the Ironmonger suit looked like an absolute unit.
I'm deeply enjoying the suit!
Iron Man's eventual victory was the product of teamwork, but Stane being shown with his back against us while he got blasted was a nice visual choice. The explosion that followed was the real deal, so you could say that he went out with a bang. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the dude would have appreciated my joke, you know. I don't think a lot of people realise this, but the scene in question was the end of what could have been a crazy villain in the MCU. Kurse was the first dude who was able to smack Thor's hammer away, which was a super flex, especially all the way back in 2013. Yeah, Mjolnir's loyalty may not have been the best since then, but this particular battle made us all wonder if Kurse could even be beaten. Luckily, Loki's fake-out death was all we needed to serve as the perfect distraction. But I swear, if he didn't activate the black hole grenade, then Thanos would have had some serious competition. what greater achievement is there for any hero than beating a Celestial, that too as his son? Star-Lord gets to boast that achievement, although he did kind of ruin all of that in Infinity War. Well, I'm not going to complain about what happens after because...
I'm sorry.
At least here, Peter Quill is able to give Ego a run for his money and eventually put an end to his evil reign as well. On another note though, I really liked how they chose to give Ego his end by having him crumble into nothingness. It's pretty much the thing he'd feared the most, as he spent an eternity building everything that his battle destroyed.
No!
Is that the best you can do?
Had to ask.
So, I know that Ultron is ended by a one-day-old baby here, but I also want to include the part where Wanda rips out his freaking heart. It's a powerful moment which was very much warranted, as Ultron did take her brother away for good. There was no mercy on display there, but since Ultron was an upgrade from Loki as an MCU villain, they gave him the honor of 2 deaths. Vision's final attack was a lot more polite, but I'm pretty sure Ultron wouldn't have cared for that. Ironically, Bro got ended by folks who'd go on to become a couple. I guess you could say this was the silver lining from all the chaos that happened in the film.
Godspeed, Spider-Man. Oh.
For this one, we've got the Green Goblin making a fatal mistake. I'm sure you were surprised that the OG Spider-Man movies didn't get a look in until now, eh? But here's Norman Osborn sabotaging himself in a desperate attempt to take down Peter Parker. Spider-Man was totally winning the fight until Green Goblin asked for some mercy, but if you're gonna pull off a sneak attack like that, then don't expect any sympathy from the audience when you die via your own hands, or in this case, your own glider. William Dafoe nailed it with his expressions and his sincerity towards the end, but I guess no amount of acting is gonna save you when your name is practically screaming at everyone saying you are Dafoe. It's only fitting for such an iconic villain to be given such a tragic death. Man, I still can't believe that William Dafoe came back to play this role 20 years later and managed to nail it again, as if he's remained in the character for around 2 decades.
Peter, stop! Stop! It's me!
A vengeance that's sweet for one and bitter for others makes for a truly horrifying experience. It's the main sentiment behind the end of Sebastian Shaw, as both Charles Xavier and Eric Lensher join forces to take down the main villain of X-Men First Class. To be honest, I'm glad that Shaw died here, because I couldn't have imagined how deadly a force he would have been if he was allowed to continue in the franchise. But yeah, the true appeal of this scene lies in how Shaw isn't the one reacting, but rather Professor X, as he can feel all the pain that the villain is feeling when Magneto passes that symbolic coin right through his head. It's an ominous sign which signifies Eric's transformation from Charles's friend to humanity's main villain. Side note, I loved how Magneto casually brought Shaw out after killing him, making it look almost as if he'd ended some kind of evil mutant Jesus. Oh man, this was easily Logan's most difficult victim across all his appearances. Lady Deathstrike was a bad enough experience in the previous film, but here, bro had to kill the love of his life in order to save the world, and he did it with great pain. Jean Grey could no longer control her Phoenix powers, which was basically the entire plot of this movie, but its grand finale stood out amongst the rest of its questionable runtime, with Jean basically destroying everything in sight. There really was only one dude who could have stopped her in this situation, and it really sucked for it to have been the Wolverine. The overall scene is quite solid, as we see Logan healing himself on the go before he finally uses the opening Jean gives him to end her life. But yeah, the tears wouldn't stop flowing after witnessing the end of a tragic love affair like this. Yes, I'm aware that Jean and Cyclops were supposed to be the main couple, but Scott Summers got sidelined so bad that we only got to see him as a teenager after this. Who would have thought that this entry would be a pretty emotional farewell? I mean, sure, Killmonger is one of the greatest MCU villains without a doubt, but the fact that people were literally crying when they saw him go meant that he was special to them. Man, seeing this right after the Jean Grey entry is pretty tough if I'm being honest. Yeah, it's very rare for a villain to gain the sympathy of an audience, but Killmonger did it without even having to make himself come across as some helpless loser who needs our pity. The man went out on a high, having had the fight of his life against T'Challa in his Black Panther outfit. The little chat they had towards the end while gorging on a beautiful sunset also made us realise that all of this drama could have easily been avoided if some adults had just sat down together and talked it out. This was a villain who had solid motivation and, more importantly, great sense of honour. That's why he commanded everyone's respect, even in death.
You believe that? Kid from Oakland running around believing in fairy tales.
And saving the best for last, we've got a snap that ends it all for good. Honestly, when every single is getting wiped out in front of your eyes, there's no other place you can keep such an entry. It's Iron Man's grand finale, and he makes sure to take out all the remaining threats to the MCU up until that point. Of course, Tony Stark didn't realise that the main villains were the Phase 4 and Phase 5 writers, because they did a lot more damage to the MCU than Thanos could have ever done. Anyway, it's a larger-than-life moment as we see all of Thanos' army getting disintegrated, along with the Mad Titan himself, who gives us a look of total and complete defeat. I may have made fun of the Infinity War Thanos getting decapitated so easily, but at least the dude scored a W in his movie, so yeah, this is easily the most cheered for death across the whole Marvel universe. Hope you liked the video, please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.
Do me a favor and blow Mark 42.
No!